Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation. Of this long-term and complex investigation. Of this long-term and complex investigation. Of this long-term and complex investigation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Truth and Transparency. Good evening. Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday. Gonna jump right into it. Thank you for being here. Let's see here. Full courtroom. Everybody in attendance. Everybody, I think, got in. I don't think anybody didn't get in. Yeah. Betsy Blair led off the day. Betsy Blair led off the day. What's up, mods? Members, subscribers, lurkers, everybody. What's up? I'll tell you that I think it's been a little interesting what the jury has asked as of recent. They're being extremely critical of the defense's witnesses, if you want my opinion, but these questions. So Betsy Blair was recalled because, remember, she wasn't able to testify because it was outside of the scope when she was asked by the defense when they wanted to go into this car that she saw. So Betsy Blair takes a stand about 9:17 a.m. and they ask her, how many times were you asked on direct examination when the state called you up here? How many times were you asked about a car that you saw? And she said, the prosecution never asked me about a car that I saw. Okay, check. So, all right. Well, how many times did you go out to the trail that day? I was out there 2 times. 2 times. And the second time when you arrived, what time roughly was that about? 1:45 p.m. arrived. And then I left a quarter after, 2. Give or take. And were there any cars when you left? No. So it was just her vehicle when she left. Okay. And she said that she came, made a left and went, 300 north, which is how she was on the camera. So she said there was a businesses on her north side. There was a house. There was a government building. She was referring to this as a government building. She did not call it the old CPS building. She said there was a government building on the left-hand side. So she said there's a government building, and it was right where the trail, there was parking. It was where this building was, it had a trail that led up to, you can go to where Freedom Bridge was. And then there was this Anderson, and then they kind of stopped. And they said, what's the name of that government building? What do you call it? And she's like, well, I never called it this, but people have referred to it as the CPS building. CPS lot, So, okay. She's like, others called it that. Now, what did you observe when you drove past there? I observed one car. And how come this stuck out to you? Well, because it wasn't parked how other cars normally would park. It was turned around and backed in. Okay. And this was something new that came out that no one's talked about. Not only did Betsy Blair do a sketch of a person, she also drew a sketch of the vehicle that she saw. So that's never been talked about. So she did, she said, the overall shape, I said it had sharp angles. Okay. Did you say that it reminded you of something? My dad's car, that 1965 Comet, whatever. What about this color? What color was it? She's like, I I just remember saying that it was not a bright color. It was not like a red or a yellow. Okay. And then he's like, well, do you want me to refresh your recollection of, you made a statement in April of 2019. And then so she looks at it and he's like, yeah, transcript, page 7. Okay. Oh yeah. In 2019, you also said it could not have been black. The vehicle that she saw could not have been black. And she wore contacts. And so with her contacts, she had like 20/20 vision. Okay. Did you say anything about like it being a hatchback? She's like, I saw the side of it. I saw the side of it. And then it gets to exhibit LLL, which is the defense says, did you draw a profile of the vehicle that you saw? I did. So Betsy Blair drew a profile of this vehicle that she saw. And so the defense has exhibit LLL, and she's like, I did. I approached the witness. Does this document, look familiar? Yep, that's my drawing. It's a top side, and it's like the top and the side. Okay. Move to admit, publish to the jury. Okay. Nothing further. Nothing further. Now on cross. Miss Blair, Miss Diener did this one. February 17th, 2017, that's when you spoke to police, right? And that's kind of important, that February 17th date. And we'll talk about it later, but why I think it's important. And so when you talk to the police, that's when you talk to them, February 17th, 2017, right? Yep. And now for this purpose that you are here today, the state provided you with all of your statements, all of your transcripts of anything that you've said that we have. She's like, yeah, you guys did. So they gave her hair. This is, depositions, whatever they've done with her. Here you go. Here's everything that you have, that we have of you. Yeah, provided all statements from prosecution. Told the officers that I thought it was like a sedan. Nothing really stood out, she was trying to say. It was an older model, okay? So there's no way that you would say an older model, okay, is in 2017, that Ford Focus was a 2016. Like, come on. Like, you're never going to say that's an older model. Again, how was your vision back then? Contact lenses 20/20, baby. Okay. Juror number 5 had a question, and that was it. Juror 5 said, and how I knew it was Juror 5 because I was watching. Okay, she's my little gray-haired little grandma, little cute thing. I think she's got some family ties to the Popo. Anyways, I could be wrong. Question, Miss Blair, or she called her Betsy. Is it possible that the vehicle that you saw belonged to an employee at the building? Which, hello guys, we have to remember, the way that Betsy Blair said it was like a government building. It was a government building is how she referred to it. A government building. And everybody's been referring to it as this old CPS lot. She's like, no, it couldn't have been somebody that was an employee because it was an abandoned building. There were no employees. So finally, the jury gets to now hear that this building here, this isn't a building that's like working, functioning. People would be parked there. Okay. This is a building that nobody works at. It's an abandoned building. So the jury didn't know that until today. So take that for what it's worth. Then the jury asked, well, did you check to see if it was an employee? But they didn't realize the question was coming back because this was an abandoned building. Okay. And she's like, well, I don't know if they checked to see that. Like, how the fuck would Betsy Blair know that? Like, what the fuck kind of question was that? So I put a little star next to that because I thought that was just a ridiculous, stupid question. Okay. How the fuck would Betsy Blair know if they checked to see if it was an employee? Like, but that's not that. Why aren't you asking the police this? You get what I'm trying to, like, you get where this is going, guys? Like, that's just, something's off there with these questions lately with the jury the past 2 days. I've not been really impressed. In fact, I feel like, I don't know. All right, witness number 2, Dr. Stewart Grazin, Grassan, Grazion. I think that's actually how you spell it. He's from Boston. He's from Boston, guys. I'm like, damn. Because we were just out there for the Karen Reed case. So he lives in the Boston area. This dude is a psychiatrist. He Harvard everything. He went to New York to get his MB. And then he was at Harvard for his undergrad. Then he went back to Harvard for medical school. Then he got his he's got a law degree. I mean, this dude is stacked. This witness is stacked. And he's there to talk about, now, I think this really hit home. This witness hit home with the jury. And he taught. So where he's at now with his career is he does a lot of teaching. He does a lot of seminars. He does a lot of lectures. But he's stacked. He's on the board for the American blah, 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 like all this shit, okay? He's in good standings, yes. You know, he completed his residency in 1977. A little handsome little thing. Little cutie pie. Like, it was just a cute little thing. Now, his specialty is about solitary confinement. And I learned something new today. So I always try to learn, and I want to share with you guys what I learned. He also said that the stuff that what he does is, he does a lot with class action lawsuits, okay? But his specialty area is solitary confinement. But why would you be called to testify? Well, I could testify I've testified wide range. But like mental state, malicious prosecution, FBI helping the government. He was just talking about this one case where he explained that this guy that was helping the FBI, he was giving them information. And he's like, yeah, the reason that he stopped talking to you guys is because of the way that you guys started treating him. You guys started treating him like absolute dog shit, and he shut down. Like, what do you, like, this isn't going to make, like, it can happen all different ways. It all just depends on the person. Anyways, several hundreds, he's testified several hundreds of times. They go through his CV. I'm not going to even, it's stacked. No objection to the CV. Now, well, Rosie says, did I reach out to you? Yes, you did. Now, there was some issues leading up to this guy's testimony because the state objected, and the state was like, listen, we don't want this guy testifying to his opinions of other people's opinions. Okay. Anyways, they went back and forth before the day started. That's why we got started at 9:17 instead of 9 o'clock, because there was preliminary matters, and this was one of them because the state put in a motion lemony because to limit this guy's testimony. Well, good thing the defense won the objection / the motion and blah. So this guy was asked, this doctor was asked, what material? So I reached out to you, right? Rosie says, and he says, yes. Okay. I asked you to look into something for this case, right? Yes. Okay. So I wanted you to look into possibly some incriminating statements that were made by Mr. Allen, right? Yes, that's exactly what you wanted me to look into. Except he couldn't do it leading. I'm just making it quicker for you guys. And what did I offer up to you to look at in order to render what you thought? Well, you gave me the psychologist's report, who was just on the other day, the medical records, jail records, videos, audio phone calls, transcripts, inmate logs, CO logs, like basically the works, okay? And so you reviewed stuff from November of 2022 to April and May of 2023, okay? Material to review. Yes. And then you looked at some stuff in February and March of 2024, because he went to that second prison. So did anything stick out to you? What stuck out to you? Sidebar, because we got to make sure that the prosecution's saying, once again, we're trying to keep out his opinion, but he's an expert, so shouldn't he be able to say his opinion? Like, this does not, it's just like, wow, what they're trying to keep out. That this doctor cannot testify. Sidebar is over, a couple minutes. So let's talk about solitary confinement. Okay, what does, that phrase mean? Well, small cell, minimal opportunity to be stimulated. You're going to be extraordinary. It's going to be lonely. That's how hard is it to function? After how long would you become not being able to function in solitary confinement? Like, what would you start to see deteriorate? And, you become confused, bizarre behavior. So you reviewed these videos. Yes. Did you review Dr. Wallow's notes? Yes. Oh, because guess what? These actually come from Nick. Nick says, I have some void of your questions. You say you reviewed videos. Yes. Okay. What else did you review? Dr. Wallow notes. And that the mattress was on the floor. But you never visited the jail, right? No. But it's, in a one-man cell in WCU, like that's what it's basically like. Does he have reliable information to be giving his opinion on? And it's just like, dude, are you fucking kidding me right now? What is this? Have you been to the crime scene? What the hell does that have to do with if I can talk about solitary confinement? Well, what? It's just. It's ridiculous. It's a damn waste of time. The defense provided you those videos, though, right? Yeah. I mean, the defense did provide me with the videos, of course. Anyways. But this is where my bombshell comes in. This is where I didn't know. But the United Nations, there's policy with the United Nations, and he said, the United Nations says that if you are in solitary confinement for 15 days straight, that's torture. That's considered torture. 15 days straight. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, wow. I was like, okay, wow. 15 days would be considered like torture to be in. So think about that. Now talk about Richard Allen. So, wow, standard, like 15 days is like, if you're doing that, they're considering that torture. So, what are some things that happen if you're in, that you've noticed? Well, you become disoriented. Your memory starts being all effed up. You're confused, delirium, no memory of a certain period of time. Like the smearing of the feces is normal of somebody in solitary confinement. Acting out sexually, throwing things all over, walking around naked, thinking, and your thinking and your concentration is very, very poor. You have no stimulation, okay? And you have a higher rate of suicide, 7 to 9 times higher than if you're in like Gen Pop, okay? And then they wanted him to define what's delirium, So he then gave a comparison to like somebody that had like an eye patch on and what it ends up doing to you. And so I was listening to that and I was just like, wow. But basically when you like, he's saying that if you're delirious and you're suffering or you have delirium, you're mentally confused. You have this huge fog in your head. But what really kind of got to where I think it kind of really hit home was you said you listened to phone calls. Yep. Did you see symptoms in Mr. Allen that were, how would you define them? Absolutely problematic. Absolutely. Like he was using the words absolutely. Okay. Then we get into false memory. And this is what was huge, is this false memory. And he killed it because it was just awesome to hear him talk about this because of the language. So clinically, false memory is if you start sentences off by saying things like, it's, if you start as images, like if you're describing an image versus I believe or I think something happened. I think this is what I did. I think when you say those words, I think, and then you're saying something. versus talking about actual images. So I was like, holy shit, false memory does not exist. Listen. I think I remember that. When someone says, I think I remember that, you know, just so think about when you're talking to anybody and you've ever heard them say, yeah, you know what, I think I remember that. That should be like, what the fuck right there? Like, as far as he's concerned, because he then explains it. He says that, I think I remember. He's like, this is an indication of false memories. Okay? You're just saying something that's just not there. And it's hallmark. It's consistent with what Richard Allen and how they had to say it, because they were objecting to this, you know, teetering of whatever. But basically, Richard Allen's the way that he would say things is they evolved over time to saying, I think da da da. Like, I think I killed Abby and Libby. I think. So that was part of it. It's like a belief that you talk yourself into, but yet you have it. And so here it goes to cross. And Nick McClellan is like, or I'm sorry. And so Nick didn't do it. The chick did it, Diener. And I was just like, I look to my left and I look to my right when she's asking these questions. And he's like, or she's like, okay, so your study research, what did you provide them to do when you do these studies and these researches? And he's like, what did I provide them to do these studies and these researches? And he's like, I think you were confused. Our study is someone who was often like someone that has no memory. Do they recant things versus why somebody would recant something? But we don't provide anybody anything. Like, this just makes no sense. And he just tells her, he's like, I think you're confused about my testimony. He's like, they're talking about why somebody would recant. The memory, tried to sort out why somebody would recant versus a real memory. And so they're going back and forth. And he's just like, you're confused with my testimony here. You're confused with why I'm even testifying. You're confused why I'm here. And so here's me. And I said, this bitch has no grasp of what is going on. And the witness told her that, like, you don't, like, she's like, well, you do understand that there was an order for safekeeping. And he's like, it doesn't matter about an order for safekeeping. This isn't about the why you did something. We don't care about why Mr. Allen was in ordered safekeeping. We're talking about the conditions that he was living in, or anybody would be living in. Okay. And so he says, it's just like this. He's like, I'm not an expert on prison administration. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not an expert on your prison administration. That's not what I'm here for. I'm talking about the conditions of solitary confinement and what the effects have. Okay. I'm not an expert on your prison admin policies. And she's just like, oh, okay. Like, she just got basically put into place. And he just kept reiterating that, like, it doesn't matter if there's an order for safekeeping. Okay. This is about what transpired because you decided to keep Richard Allen in solitary confinement for however long. All right. And that would he, or anybody for that matter, what would that lead to? And he's like saying, absolutely, psychosis. Absolutely. This is exactly what it would lead to. So she kind of just was like, okay, no more for the questions. The juror questions. This is the juror number 5 again with the questions. Juror said, can psychotic behavior go back to normal? So, like, if you have a psychotic episode, are you able to have that and then be back to normal? And he said, yes, absolutely. Can a normal person because they all saw Richard Allen as normal because they got to witness his interviews. Okay. So can a normal person become psychotic? 6 months to a year. It's like, yes. Yes. Absolutely. He says his words were absolutely. Like, and then can they go back to being normal? And it's like, yes. And they would not let him answer, though, the question with the reasoning. He was just answering as, well, yes. And he wanted to explain anybody's conditions can change. We're talking about the conditions. So if you change somebody's conditions, anything could change. Okay. And you know, that was it. And I felt like those questions, for some reason, the jury is wondering. I feel like they're wondering if Richard Allen is safe to be in society. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, this isn't about that. That's kind of how I got those questions, though. It was like, why is the jury asking, can psychotic behavior go back to normal? I mean, maybe that's their way of asking the question to see if Richard Allen's not faking it, you know? But why wouldn't you just come out and say, okay, you took a look at everything. Was Richard Allen faking this? Or it just seems like, hey, if we put him back out in society, is everything going to be okay? You know, I don't know. It was just those two questions today really kind of bothered me because I started getting the feeling, do these people think that like they understand that the defense is saying that Richard Allen didn't do this, right? We're only talking about why he gave these ridiculous alleged confessions, okay? And when they came about, and it was after he endured all of this shit, okay? And it's just like, so if these people truly can't put themselves in to say, okay, look, the guy was normal, the guy was fine. He said he didn't do it. He, you know, was adamant of it. Like, no way, no way, no way. And it's like, then he suffers, you know, 4 or 5 months of all of this shit. And then he starts saying off the wall stuff and starts doing off the wall things. It's like, if anybody, how you can listen to people that are in this field and think that this shit isn't real, then why do we have all these medications? Why is everybody being pumped big farm? What the fuck is going on here? Like, so if this jury is really going to be starting to disappoint me, if you're not grasping that mental health is real and that mental health, Richard had it before he ever went in there. Okay. And so he had his mental health was unfucking treated. And then on top all of this shit, how the fuck, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Let's even say that he doesn't have mental health. So maybe these questions were just, I don't know. I didn't like them. It made me start questioning, like, are you not getting it? Are you, like, what's going on here? But so I don't know, whatever, take it for what you want. I don't know. I didn't like the questions. I thought they were ridiculous. When I heard that the United Nations considers 15 days in a row of solitary confinement torture, that made me say to myself, oh my God. Like, oh my God. "15 days, this dude, 13 months. 13 fucking months. And then let's even like just use up to the first 4 months before he started saying this ridiculous shit, you know? Come on. So then we go to Dr. Eric Warren. Now I think Dr. Eric Warren, he was like a Syray. Okay. So think about Syray. This is Witness 3 today. And Dr. Eric Warren, Memphis, Tennessee. And he's a forensic consultant with firearm tools, ballistics, crime scene reenactment, everything that basically Syray does with the phones that you guys want to talk about, and how he used to be law enforcement, and now he started his own company, and he does a lot of testifying for both. My majority is the prosecution, but so let's talk about who this guy is. This guy was the combat, the expert from the Indiana State Police lab who said that the bullets were matched. Okay, so this is, I wanted to hear this. I'm like, okay, here we go. He went to Vanderbilt. He has a BA. He has a doctorate. Okay, chemistry. He used to be a FBI special agent. Again, firearm, tool mark specialist, examiner. I mean, you name it. The guy was with the violent crime response team for the state of Tennessee. He was in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Okay, so we're talking about this is law enforcement, right? Ex-law enforcement dude. And it was like, okay, why did you leave law enforcement? Well, my background with school is I wanted to do more with what he's doing, like the forensics of it. He wants to, he was like, when a bullet penetrates somebody and now you're dealing with how a bullet reacts to like the body. So it was really interesting to hear how and why he got into what he's doing. He loves the research approach to things, and he couldn't get into all of that with what he was doing. It was like limited, So, but are you active? Are you board certified? What do you have? All of this stuff. I serve on the board. It takes up a lot of my time. I'm on the American blah, blah, blah. It takes up a ton of my time. I'm active. Have I testified for the state and the defense? Yes. In similar matters? Yes. As well as civil matters. Negligence with civil firearms lawsuits and shit like that. For training, I've received so much training. His CV is really, really long, but he also gives training. He's the one that trains these people that would do like a job like the Idaho State Police Oberg did. Workshops. So for new examiners, he hires people and trains them. So thank you so much there, Karen Jones. Karen, shake it. Kelly says, Lana, thank you for all your hard work and dedication to the truth. Love ya. Back at you, Justice. Stephen, thank you so much, member, for 4 months. Oh, there you go. Free Karen Reed over there. Yeah. So let's see. We go to Exhibit Triple N. That's a CV. It's in. He said, Rosie said, is there like a critical community that's critical of your guys' work? And from there, you're supposed to like work with them. This is like the way that peer reviews happen, things like that. And he's like, yes. Okay. And there's medical engineering with it, firearms. It's a way to defend our procedures, PCAST, SNA. And so he's just reading off like this is, when we're going to speak on something, we're going to get blowback. But the way that we've all been doing it is if we work together, it can be helpful to be critiqued critically, and it's constructive. And if you have good communication skills, then you're going to have these good discussions that lead to, that's how peer review can be really, really beneficial. And so what I think what they were getting at there is that if you want your work to be seen by others and for it to be like approved by them, you'd want to like, I should say, showcase it or put it out there for people to critique it. So I thought that was interesting that he welcomes that. You should welcome that because it's all about, it's all about advancing what we're able to do, not who has, the amount of wins or losses in a courtroom. That's kind of how I took it. But so Rose says, did I give you stuff to review in this case? He says, yes. The examiner, the ISP, Oberg's work product, I evaluated the basis of her opinion. There was a case file. She had 3 reports in it. There was 13 to 14 to 15 photographs that she had in there. There was micro photographs. There were supporting documents. And yeah, so he was, all right. So everything I got, yes. Anything that was missing, no. Okay. So these photographs, these micro photographs, is that normal in a case file? Yes. What's the procedure? What's like, So you should have these photographs. Is it important to photograph? Yes, it's also really important to photograph with really good lighting, with your documentation. You're going to have your photographs with anything, if something like you're just always documenting. So it's used so that when you do a case, like if it was in 2017 and you don't go to trial for a long time, you want to have really good documentation so that it refreshes everything that you need to know about that case down the road when you have to testify. So it's a big thing to refresh your recollection. And that's why you need to take really good documentation and really good pictures. So then the second most important thing that you're doing is that then I have to take my lab of my reporting and present it properly. And that's important. That's why I have to document it, right? So that I can show you how I got to my conclusions. I have to show my work. So if your shit's all over the place and it doesn't make sense, or it's just half-assed, how am I going to be able to translate this? And then one day talk in front of a jury, and I have to get you folks to then understand what I was saying and doing. So then that third thing is just that. Then I have to illustrate to the jury to show how it all happened. Okay. So with the microscope and those photos, it's the projection of, it's a 2-dimension image, and you really want to be thorough with your photography. So I started thinking about that. I'm like, man, maybe more of these people that are awesome and love taking photos should become crime scene, they should go and get jobs where they can use their talent in photography for crimes, So I started thinking about that. So is anybody out there that really likes photography and that you're really good at it, maybe this is an area that you could really help, because I think that people suck at it, the shit that we're seeing. But they were making a big point to say that since the 1900s, the process of making sure that you take good photographs, it's always been part of the protocol. Okay, you have to take good photographs. Show your work, and then it's going to refresh your memory, and then you're going to show others how you got to, your work. You're backing up your conclusions. And I feel like they were leading up to this because they were going to be talking about this woman's report and these photographs. Okay. I think he gave a really good example to say, okay, to understand, let's take an example of like, there's such a thing as individual characteristics versus subclass characteristics. And you want to know the difference. And so when they're talking about this bullet, you're talking about striations, and he's like, okay, a striation is this. Think of scratches. Think of a scratch on your car. Just throwing that out there. I guess like that. It's a mark, right? But now let's talk about an SUV. You have SUVs just across the line, but then you have different models and makes, and those become subclasses. And so it was just cool how he was trying to break it down so that a lay person could understand what the fuck he's talking about. Okay. So he's like, for example, let's talk about a pocket knife. All these pocket knives have blades. So you whip out your pocket knife, you open it up, and let's say you just start stabbing whatever, like you're cutting something, wood and whatnot. But let's say that you go ahead and you chip your blade. And so now what we call a gross feature is being that the blade was chipped. And so now that gross feature from the blade being chipped has a gross feature that would then imprint some type of way into wood or a human being. It's because of that blade being chipped, so then it's changing its formation, and it's called a gross feature. So the word gross. When they had the state's witness up there, she showed some video, and I wasn't there for this. She showed a video, and so Rosie said, "Hey, did you watch this video?" And he's like, "Yes." He's like, "Do you think that it had any relevance to what you and her would have been hired to do in this job?" He said, "There's no relevance in that video. That is not even what we're talking about." And I was just like, damn, because people out there in the world of the YouTube world were like, "Oh my God, go watch Judy Ron and go watch this and go watch this and go watch these videos." And it's just like, it's dead on. He's like, that's comparing oranges to apples, and that's not what you're supposed to do. And then I wanted to hear, because I'm writing it down. It's like, No relevance to that. I'm like, well, that just blew up, Duty Ron, what they were talking about, because that's what that video was all about. Then they go into this, and I didn't know this. Rosie's like, so labs have certain, like, have you ever heard of a lab getting shut down? He's like, oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, damn. Well, when? He's like, just recently. Rhode Island's lab for the firearm, they were suspended. Wyoming was just suspended. And I'm just like, wait, what? Yeah. Because their shit ain't right. Because they keep fucking shit up. Because they don't know these people don't know what they're doing. And so I was just like, damn. So go check it out. Rhode Island and Wyoming. Go check out their state labs. And check out the firearms parts of it. And see what you come back. And see if this guy's full of shit or not. I checked him out. And I don't think he's full of shit. In fact, I thought he made perfect fucking sense to me. When he's like, okay, let's compare this report that she did. So I'm going to hand you a report and you're looking at it. And then right off the rip, when you look at someone's report, think about anything that you do in life. If I'm teaching you how to put a rocking chair together, all right, and I look at this manual that you handed me and I'm like, wait a second, we're missing parts 8 through 10 here. So like, I can just look at your report and see if there's something wrong. So, and I don't want to say that there's something wrong with it, but I have questions about it. It's about showing your work. It's like that type of thing. It's like there's stuff missing. How could you get to the conclusions that you got to when you have stuff that's missing, that's vital for you to have gotten to that conclusion? That's why when we do math problems in school and they're like, you have to show your work. You can't just write down the answers 460. You're going to do your work. So here we go. And he says, okay, she had a 6 Sauer handgun, Mr. Allen's. It was ISP number 314, right? Yes. And then we have the item 16, which is the magic bullet, right? Yes. So we have his gun and we have the bullet. Now, so did you, Rosie said, so to cycle a dummy round, and he's like, well, I would never call it a dummy round because it was a live round because the bullet's live. It's going to do something to you. So I would never call it a dummy round. So I thought that was awesome how he corrected him with that. Did she use her cycled test round? And he said, no, that's not how she made her comparison. Okay. So this is where everyone should be really truly listening. It's like, so you have a cycled round versus a fired round. And a cycled round is that it's just going through. It's like you have, how I understood it is that if I have a clip in, but then I have one bullet in the chamber, if I go to fuck with my gun and I take the clip out, okay, I could also pop out the other one in the chamber, fucking with the gun. So think about this. You know how, like, do you ever see like hard asses trying to fuck with their shit and like they'll take out their gun and then they like pull the clip out and they're like, yeah, looking at it, like, yeah, and then they put it, like acting like I'm badasses, and then they'll like cock it, all that type of shit, and they're just trying to. So like when he mentioned that to me, that yeah, okay, if you take out your clip, and it's just like, oh, I get it now, like, and someone was fucking around also like that to check, make sure what you don't know that you just have a loaded clip. Like, it's like, what? It's a magazine. Yeah, it is. It's the same. No. So, let's see. He says, okay, so you look at this stuff. What was the biggest thing that you noticed? Well, for starters, I've never seen somebody call at a chamber face when she wants to talk. There's 3 different parts of this, which is there's 3 tools in her examination, which is her extractor, her ejector, and then chamber face. And so it was like, okay, well, what came about? Like, what is she looking at? And he's like, well, I have not seen any evidence that. So, for example, she did her ejector, and there was photos of it. So check mark, she did good. And there was a ejector mark, check. she said she did it quite well, that she like documented everything. Okay. And then when she compared her high subclass characteristics, he agrees that the highest propensity for leaving marks, and so like she's documenting everything. Okay, good. Then he's like, okay, well, what about the extractor part? How did she document this? She didn't document it. There's nothing there that's documented. So no documentation. No documentation. What about the next, the barrel hood? She referred to it as the chamber face. Yeah, there's less research regarding this, but there was no research on it. And then in her report, there was nothing mentioned about it. So it wasn't documented at all. So, and it was like, is it possible in your opinion? Then they had to reword that. And it was like individual versus subclass characteristics. Then, you know, what's the difference there? And did she maybe make a mistake with that? So explain to the jury what you would want to see in order to be able to say if there was sufficient evidence to say that this could be a possibility. Okay. And he says, well, you have to, it's when you're going to deduct something here. And so he's like, this is the best way I can say it. Again, we're trying to be lay people here. Like, explain this to us. And he's like, well, they give a big old freaking huge poster board that's blown up this bullet. All right. And to do this comparison. And so the jury is looking at this and he's pointing stuff out. And he's like, okay, the left side is this and the right side is this, to, you know, the 314. That's the test fire 1. And then that's on the right side. And then the left side is the magic bullet, right? Yes. Okay. So what do you see there? Well, the top surface of the cartridge, light. So the valleys or the dark areas in between, the brighter marks, the spacing, the uniform. It's a hallmark with these subclasses. It doesn't have all the marks. The crime lab. And then he was going to talk about why this crime lab got booted, which was the Rhode Island one, but that got objected to, and we couldn't hear about that. I really wanted to hear about why Rhode Island got their fucking crime lab booted with this stuff. But he said the standard sufficient agreement threshold to answer all of this stuff is best done by PCAST and the peer reviews. And to reach a conclusion, you have to do, you want to have 2 runs and then, or at least one of them where it's 6 consecutive striations. And so if you can get 6 consecutive striations when you're doing your runs, then that's where you're going to get that level of saying that you have sufficient data to give a conclusion. And he said that, he says CMS, which then that was objected to because he's basically more qualified than she is, and she doesn't do that. Okay. And it was just like a big, like, pissing match there for a second. It's like, Nick sounded like a moron. Nick was like, well, you don't even use CMS. And he's like, yeah, I do. Yes, I do. I actually am qualified, certified. I went to John Murdoch in California to help teach them the course in the training. So I'm over here just like, what the fuck? There was a sidebar then again. And he's like, no, he doesn't have it listed under his training. He's like, yeah, it's actually right down there. So then Nick was like, pulled up. He's like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm like, oh God. So we get to the goods, which is, all right, when it's all come down to it, what did you come up with? And he said, when I took what she did and applied it to CMS, she had no consecutive runs with the ejector, the barrel, and there was only 1 run and 4 consecutive, and you need 6. And so all of the tests were insufficient. And I'm just like, wait, what? And he said, no, this is not a fucking match. Like, no. And I'm just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Because I was expecting just maybe like But he's like, no, these tests, how she did it. So I'm just over here. I'm just like, all right, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Well, fuck, the jury comes back after Cross, which Cross was just blowing up because he doesn't even know. Like he should have got with a specialist and said, here, these are the things that you want to ask. But let me tell you what they were. Let me tell you what the state. Wouldn't you depose people so that you could know what the hell they're about to testify to, so that you can then take that deposition, go and sit down with even your person, and go over like this is what they came up with, right? Cross was a shit show. The juror questions had more questions than Nick. And these juror questions were so hostile, though, towards, thank you, Jen. Hi, baby Dow. Love Jen. How you feeling, baby girl? Okay. Yeah. So this was another moment where I was like, okay, where are these jurors coming with the hostility when they combat what this guy is saying? All right. It's like, you have a guy, you're staring down his CV. All right. You're looking at his CV. This guy's ex-law enforcement. The only reason he's not law enforcement anymore, it's not like he started his own company to do all these other things. And he's on all these fucking boards. And I mean, what the fuck type of thing. The difference is I didn't see the pushback when you want to compare the way the jury's asking these questions upon him to the way the jury was asking the questions upon her. Meaning Oberg, the Indiana State Police that did it, all right? That woman. And I don't know how I feel about it. I think I know what I would do if I was on the jury. If I'm on the jury, I would cancel them out. I would say that, okay, you said it's a match. You say it's not. So clearly it could be or it couldn't be, and I'm just going to cancel them out. Like, for me to say which one's lying and which one's not, how could I possibly do that as a juror? Think about that. That's how I would argue it when I would go back into a court, like in a deliberating room. I'd be like, listen, we're not qualified to sit here and say that guy's lying and she's telling the truth, or she's lying and he's telling the truth. Why can't it be that both of these two people are telling the truth and it's a science experiment, okay? And they came to two different conclusions. And so based off of that, it's like, it is what it is. It's one person saying that it's not it and another person saying that it is. So then wouldn't you think that that's right there? That's nothing's conclusive there. Okay. That's how I would take it. That's how I would argue it. If I was a juror listening to this, is I wouldn't take her word and I wouldn't take his word. And what it would show me is that it could be either way. Okay. I would say that I'm believing you both. I'm believing you both because I'm believing that you guys did the work, right? But then this is the stuff that started happening. Well, did you test the bullet? No, I didn't test the bullet. I didn't have the bullet. He didn't have the bullet. So you didn't write up a report. No, because that's not what my job was. My job wasn't to write up a report. My job is to look at her report and just say, hey, with her methodology of how she got to her answer, what would you say about this? Is this like, look at it and say, is this, it's like a peer review. What do you think? Oh God, no. I don't think that she could possibly get to saying that bullet matches that gun because it was insufficient, the results. I don't need to write a report for that. What the fuck kind of report do you want me to write for that? I'm saying that what the standard is that you should see X, Y, and Z, and it's just not there. But these jurors basically wanted this person to just write up a report that said that. but that's not what he was hired to do. And he wasn't hired to perform the test and to do what she was doing, because that's not Richard Allen's job. But it's interesting because I think that the defense should have said, how much money would have cost us to have you do this? A lot of money. It costs you X amount of dollars to just have me do this. Now you want me to perform this. This is how much money it is. And let's talk about how we're getting no money. Like this, you would think that this trial is being run off of Section 9 housing. I mean, it's embarrassing when you have people that are up on the stand saying that, well, I didn't have any time for that, or I wasn't hired. Like, this is what I was hired to do. This is what I was asked to do. And I'm telling you why they weren't asked to do more, you guys, because of the money. There is no fucking money here. No money was being allowed to do this shit. That's what I saw. I saw that it's really sad, when you have even the state saying they didn't spend the $10,000 to see how tall Bridge Guy was. Are you kidding me? Wild, right? So just to hear these things, and I'm just like, okay, but I don't know. After we all had lunch, we get back in there. So this started up around 1:46 p.m. And this has been what I was been waiting for. Here's the main event of my show. I was being silly. But I've been waiting to hear from the defense's forensic examiner. Okay. So you could look at it two ways with the jury. They're doing their job to papow stuff because they want to, when they come in with their verdict, then they feel like some type of way. So ask the hard questions. Ask any question that you want. You're supposed to be asking questions because it's supposed to help you get an answer to something that you're seeking. Not to test this person's CV, I feel like. I'll explain here when we go through this. You'll see what I'm talking about. So here it is. I'm a timeline person. I want to see this fucking phone. All right. So the defense witness number 4 is Stacey Eldridge. Stacey Eldridge is sworn in, and her education is she has a BA Science Computer Info Management. She has a master's. She worked for the FBI. Now, this is where I think this is going to be interesting. You got people that, on one side, that with the state, hey, they use the FBI, but then they kick the FBI out. But the state police trained by the FBI people. So here she was a senior. She has an education and training of forensics. She was a senior analyst agent. So, she did 110 classes even after leaving the FBI in 2011. Why'd she leave? Same thing. She started up her own company. All right. She's also a teacher. All right. So they go through her CV. Then here it comes out that Nick's like, I have a question about your CV. Over here, you write down this case number, but it doesn't finish. It says, and she's like, it's because I could never get a hold of that case number. And it's really hard to get a hold of it, especially if it's an FBI case. Good luck. So she obtained her master's while working for the FBI. She worked for the FBI for 10 years. Forensic response team. She explained what she did with that. And it was gathering the information, then maintaining and storing the information, and then preserving that data. So she was always working with the extractions, and like state police would come to her, and she would extract the phones and then build reports from the phones. So she was and still is an instructor. She moved to headquarters, and then she started training new hires. Her job title was district instructor and senior special agent. She did international stuff. She has certificates. Is certified in Axiom, some other G something. She did Celebrate when she was with the feds, but she let that lapse because she says, I don't use it anymore. It's like, how she described it is everyone has their preference. Like if you're a Google user, or if you're like a Samsung user, or if you're an iPhone person. Okay. Which I can get. Awesome. So she's now does her own consulting and is a professor. And so she's testified. And this is where people wanted to give her like, oh my God, she's never testified before. It's like, and it doesn't mean she's testified 3 times for the government, for the FBI. And then she's testified one other time in where'd she testify? I think it was in, I want to say is it in New Mexico? So 3 times for the government, 1 time for a defendant. But the FBI receives the phones from the state police. And then, okay, so then you would work on them. Great. We hired you in this case, didn't we? Yes, you did. Okay. I send you an agreement letter, and then it's a letter of engagement. And your normal price is $400 an hour, right? Correct. Yep. But I only charge you guys $300 an hour. Okay. So, and where would you say that falls? She's like the middle of the pack of what you get paid. Okay. And so for this case, how many hours did you spend on this case? And I'm going to tell you right now, when I heard 65 hours to do the extraction and 15 hours of prep time for testimony, that's not a lot, but it's do the math on 80 hours, $24,000. Okay. So what were you hired to do in this case? I was hired to review Liberty's extraction that was done by Brian Bunner in October of 2017. So we didn't hire you to do the extraction. No, the extraction was already done. And then I was reviewing Liberty's extraction that was done by Brian Bunner. And that was a Celebrate report. He had a written report. There was Cecil's report. There was appendixes to Cecil's report that you reviewed. There was depositions. There was transcripts, right? All this stuff. So asking what she looked at. Yep. Pictures, video. So then she explains to the jury what's an extraction consist of. And it's pictures, videos, texts, apps, phone calls. It's going to take that data and move it all into working files so we can see, behind it. But what it's really used for is, for this case, it's an iPhone, and it's the iOS, and we're looking at everything that makes that phone work. We're looking at everything behind what cannot be manipulated by a human. And so what's going on behind, if you're to be on an app, then get off of an app and then go here. She said examination. So it's more than just like reading text and looking at phone calls. I'm looking at stuff that's basically under the hood. Like think about a car, you go to a mechanic that's going to tell you what's truly going on with your car. You're going to come to someone like me, or even with the state and who's ever extracted it, to then examine it to tell you what's up. The big thing though is it's stuff where it's encrypted stuff that we as manual people we're not supposed to be able to manipulate it, right? So there's so many files, but we use forensic software in order to go through it all, because otherwise it would take forever. Well, you can manually do it, and that's what I've been doing because I don't own any of this type of stuff, but I can manually extract a ton of shit. It takes you a long time though, but if you have these tools, these forensic softwares, it's a lot quicker. So ISP used Celebrate to get the data off of Libby's phone, okay? And the extraction, so you're getting all the data off the phone, and you save it to a hard drive, and then you make a copy. That's how it's supposed to happen. You shouldn't get on the phone. It will change the data. It will delete the data. And so this was testified to because of what they did. They got in the phone, started taking pictures of the phone, started taking screenshots of what they were doing. And that's not what you're supposed to do. All right. What you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to plug it in and you're supposed to do the extraction, and you're not supposed to fuck with anything, and you're supposed to put it in fucking airplane mode. And then you download it to a hard drive, but then you make a copy of it. But you should never be doing, turning your phone on and off all the time. It's going to delete shit. So, ISP extraction, she didn't do the extraction, so we're making it perfectly clear to the jury that it's what they did. Because if I was to do this extraction, there's 3 extractions that you could possibly do. And there's a difference in the 3. And the first one is a full file system that was never done on Liberty's phone. A full file system. User can't manipulate a damn thing. Number 2, so this is like the top one. Number 2 would be an advanced logical extraction. And then number 3 is a logical extraction, and that's a bare bones. The advanced logical is what they said they did in this case. But if you do a logical extraction, that's the bare bones. But a full file system is what you need, and they didn't do it. That's the best practice. The best practice is to do a full file system extraction. And then you're supposed to document, and you're supposed to note as you're doing things in a report. Let's say that you guys try to do this with the phone and it's not doing it. And you're supposed to document. And just because it doesn't work once or twice or 3 times, you still, sometimes it may take you 6 times to get that full file system. But you're supposed to do that. And it may take you 5 or 6 times. So you just keep, she says that you would keep going. Brian Bunner did a logical extraction. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, a logical extraction, which was bare bones. I apologize. Brian Bunner did a logical extraction, February 2017. Did it have the ability to do a full system file? Yes. Making sure that, because what they've tried to say is that we couldn't do stuff then, that didn't exist. That existed, because Libby had an iPhone 6S, and it was an iOS system 10.2 version, 100%. That was around then, and they could have done that, and they did not do it. So they did the bare bones. And then they asked, would there be any way that, let's say like that it wouldn't have been able to be possible to do the full file extraction? And she said, there's only one way. And that would be if somebody backed everything up to iTunes and encrypted it some way. That's the only way that it would not be able to do a full file extraction. And that wasn't the case with that cell phone. It was not recently backed up to iTunes and then encrypted, like in a locked position. Okay. October 5th, 2017, that was one of the days that they extracted stuff, looked at it again. And they did, they worked on Libby's phone October. Then they were the stuff like February, September, October. And so they were like turning the phone on and off. And so the question was asked is, what happens if you're doing that? If you're fucking with the phone like that? Well, yes, it caused issues. And for this phone, it caused the issue for me not to be able to tell when the phone was turned on or turned off. Is normally we'd be able to tell you that. So we would be losing information because the temp files, and the first things that you're going to lose is the more recent stuff. But then anything that's 28 to 30 days. So like when you start doing stuff like 30 days after February of when the murders happened, you could lose files that were anywhere 28 to 30 days old. So specific data turn off, turn on. Yep. Previous, like February 14, 2017, didn't know when the phone was turned off. If it was airplane mode, can't tell because of everything that fucking happened. So the last time it was shut off is missing. Yep. So the question that the jury wanted to ask here, and I'm going to jump to this and I'm going to come right back, is, I wanted them to ask, why aren't you asking her, okay, so if they would have done the full file extraction, you would have been able to tell, and they would have been able to tell when, if any times, was this phone shut off and turned back on, right? Why wouldn't the jury ask that? Maybe they feel like they already know it, but maybe just to double check. So they remind the jury right here and they say, what did we hire you to do? What were your two main priorities here in this case? Two main priorities: Apple Health data info, and you wanted me to look at what was happening with the phone at 4:33 a.m. Those are the two main things that I was hired to do, is to figure out what the hell went on, because at 4:33 a.m., a bunch of these messages come through on Libby's phone. And it was like, why? So here we go. Did you download the Knowledge C database? Yep. What can that tell you? Well, it could tell me when the screen was on and off. It could tell me the battery, the percentage of it. It could tell me what app you're looking at. And if you swap from that app to go look at your email. It's just very insightful to tell me what you were doing on your phone on certain timestamps throughout the day. Okay, that's the Knowledge C database. Okay, so Knowledge C database is triple T exhibit. So you examined Cecil's timeline in this case, and that's the state's guide. Yes. And it was admitted in as defendant exhibit P. Do you remember looking at that? Yes. Okay. So his timeline, here it is, exhibit 227. Yes. So they don't object. So she gets to put her no objection to her triple T exhibit. So with respect to exhibit P now, the judge asked for a sidebar. The judge asked for it, whatever. Now we get to produce what I've been waiting for, which is, ta-da, exhibit on the TV, which is an Excel spreadsheet. I was like, fuck yeah, give it to me. And it's the Knowledge C database. I'm like, hell yeah, here we go. She says, this is a huge database. And so if you guys know all about Excel, you're going to have your columns and you're going to have your rows. And she said, basically, everything that's seen from the naked eye, we're going to go and look all the way down to column AG. Stop at column AG. So defense goes all the way down to AG. And she says, this is a Z metadata, and I'm looking for human words. And so this defendant exhibit P is published to the jury. So the jury is now seeing it all. And it's Cecil's timeline. And she says, she asks the questions, do you generally agree with Cecil's timeline? She says, yes. But what do you disagree with? She says, I dug deeper and I disagree with the date and times of iMessages, FaceTime calls, voicemails, and cell tower, February 13th, 2017, on and off the cell towers. She's like, what specifically do you disagree with? Well, for starters here, the last time that Liberty's phone was on a cell tower on February 13th was at 5:45 p.m. because it was in and out from 2:32 to 5:45. Okay. And then it's off, and it does not reconnect until February 14th at 4:33 a.m. Remember, their timeline has everything ending at 10 p.m., 10:33 p.m. that day. So defense asks, OJ says, cell phone records. Did you review those cell phone records? Yes. Libby's? Yes. Okay, you reviewed them. You reviewed the pings? Yes. You reviewed the AT&T information location? Yes. So defendant exhibit triple Q. What is that? That's a log from AT&T. It's the precision historical location data. Objection from the state. Nick says, she is not qualified to testify about location, precision location, historical. Do you work for AT&T? No. Like, so he starts voideering her about this. Then, so, did you work for AT&T? No. When's the last time that you would have seen, what's your training and experience with being able to read the. And then Jay comes back and she says, is this the same format that you worked with the FBI in 2009, 2011? Yes. Would you go to seminars? When's your last seminar? Oh, I go to all time. Blah, blah. Yes. Okay. So then she says like, this is nothing different than any type of, to be able to read what this means. Is the format changed? No, it's the same format. That what I'm looking at right now is the same format that I've always looked at. Thank God it's fine. Okay. It's overruled over the state's objection. And so Nick then says, well, she only wants to talk about this one page. And then Ajay's like, well, yeah, February 13th and 14th, there's 100 pages here. If you want to admit them all, because then he's like, well, this is incompleteness of evidence. And I'm like, you got to be a fucking asshole right now. What the hell are we talking about? And she's like, I'm not trying to confuse the jury here. Why would I give them 100 pages? I'm just looking at February 13th and 14th. That's all we're going to have right here. That's it. I'm not trying to confuse the jury. But clearly, what's his name is. So it's in. Okay, here's the historical location information connection. 5:44 p.m. and 4:33 a.m. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us the date and time of the last connection and the latitude and longitude of that. Okay, so then she wants to describe for the jury, what does UTC mean and what does GMT mean? Because this is really important, which is in order to not worry if something was in Eastern Standard Time or Pacific, or they're going to go with the universal time, and that's off of London. And then depending on where you're at, you're either going to subtract, 5, 6, or 7 hours. So they break all that down. And so she goes over that. So she said moving right to left. On the right side, you got the longitude, latitude. Then you got the GMT time and the time and date. And so what we're looking at here is, since we're in Delphi, Indiana, you're 5 hours ahead of London. So you're going to subtract the 5 hours. And that's why when you're looking at anything that says, and she was just explaining why you're subtracting the 5. So item 1, what's item 1? Well, that's the last connection date and time, 2/14/2017 at, it said 9:33, but then you have to subtract your 5. So it's 4:33 a.m. And that's when all those calls were coming through. And then item number 2, that's the last connection date and time on 2/13. And that's at 22:44, which is, then you can convert that, and you're looking at 10:44, but then you have to subtract your 5, and now you're at 5:44. Awesome. Perfect. So what did you notice when you were looking at that time between 4 or 5:45 on the 13th to 4:33 on the 14th? And she's like, well, I took multiple things here to determine certain things, which is, I took 3 things. And she said that based on the fact that there was numerous pieces of data that led me to believe certain things, which is, number 1, there's apps that have data, okay? And there's no times associated with any apps that would have been on working. Meaning that if, let's say, your phone's on, then there's going to be some data behind, hey, that this app was running, like WhatsApp or Snapchat or whatever, okay? So she's like, there's no apps with any data during that time frame, okay? There's, and so she's, without saying, because she can't say, oh, that means the phone was off. She's just letting you determine on your own what this would mean. So if nothing's running and there's no location and nothing's moving here, why would you think that a phone wouldn't be connected to towers? Because it's not on. Otherwise, it would connect to towers, right? So she says, okay, well, Sergeant Cecil, he says at 5:44, do you agree with his do you agree that well, she wants to say that. She's like, well, let's just continue to talk about what we disagree with. Talk about iMessages. What does iMessages mean? And she's like, okay, this is Apple's way of prioritizing stuff. So back in the day when we would all have to pay for text messages, the way that would all work, though, is if back in the day, a big selling point is iPhone to iPhone is going off of Wi-Fi. Okay. So Apple prioritized their messages back and forth using Wi-Fi instead of paying per text. And that's why it was like, remember, your data was included and you got to, oh my God, yeah, are you iPhone? Okay, I'm iPhone to iPhone. Like, it was free for us to text. You guys can remember back then. So I was like, yeah, that's actually why that, like, how that works is that we're not texting, we're using Wi-Fi. All right. So it hits the Apple server between the messages, and that's how that all happens. And she's like, just like how there can be evidence of something happening, when there's evidence of stuff that's not happening, that can tell a story too. So she's like talking about, she's like, okay, here's item line 450, 451. So she's going through. She's like, let's talk about the voicemails here. Item line 480. What do you feel about the voicemails? She's like, I completely disagree with his findings on the voicemails. I said, oh God, what happened? She says, these phone calls between 5:44 and 4:33, is there any evidence of when they arrived? No. There's evidence of when they arrived, but when they would have been sent, you'd want to compare those to when they were sent from somebody else's phone. Duh. But the missed calls, no, we can't find anything on these missed calls. Voicemails. When the voicemails were left. Are you guys ready for this bombshell? I about fell out of my chair. That we couldn't even believe it. The numerous voicemails were somehow not delivered until February 17th. What the fuck?
2017. Remind everyone when the murders were.
The voicemails that were left, the numerous voicemails between 5:44 allegedly and 4:33 allegedly. But these voicemails were not delivered until the 17th. You know what I immediately thought to myself? I'll tell you one day. What'd you think about the cell phone ping? What'd you think? Yeah, that's like, they ran the pings. Okay. So AT&T repeatedly tried to ping, and it never successfully pings the phone. It was after 5:45 to 4:33. There was nothing successful. Okay, AT&T pings, voicemails delivered, lack of data being logged. Okay, so think about this. Ready? When did the guy say that he worked on the phone? When did he do the extraction? Remember, Brian? When did he do it? Brian worked on the phone and did this extraction on 2/17. Okay, 2017. Okay. So this is this way of leading up. This is her leading up to something. So what she's basically saying is the phone. And I just think that this should have been, I'm able to break it down because I just know what the fuck we're talking about. So let me break this down to you. She said, I looked at these three huge things, which is this. The AT&T pinging stops at a certain time and then comes back on at a certain time. Okay. Or stops at a certain time and then comes on at a certain time. Then the voicemails and when they were delivered. So I took into account AT&T pings, the voicemail is being delivered, and then the lack of data being logged in between the 5:44 and the 4:33 time. When you take those all into consideration, that's what led you to then have that's what could lead somebody to what we're about to talk about. So do you have an explanation, she asks, for why Libby's phone did not connect to the tower. So if it wasn't connecting to a tower after 5:44, okay, because do you have an explanation for that? Her explanation was 3 things. External, meaning somebody, if you're externally doing something, that means you could shut off the phone. You have to externally do something, right? You could actually, metal could be blocking your signal. So like, you know how sometimes when we go into certain buildings and we don't get cell service because it's fucking in, there's metal. Okay. And ultimately, like, signal block, like your signal's blocked. So moving into what, like a Faraday bag or something like that. But those are the 3 things that something externally had to happen with that phone. Something externally had to happen. Do you guys understand what that means? External. It means here's the outside of the phone. I have to externally, if I touch the off button and then I start walking around with that phone, ain't no fucking health data going to be on that phone. All right. Now, how does health data, so when you want to talk about to detect movement and vibrations, what's the accuracy? What's the accuracy on that? On the distance, the steps? And this is all the stuff that I want to know because of the Karen Reed case as well. What's the accuracy? And she's like, well, if you don't know about this, but you need to check it out. The Forensic Netherlands, that they're like the big research behind all this. But the steps are the most accurate with the iPhones. It's your steps. Now, when you want to talk about distance traveled, it could be 30 to 40% off either way. Okay. And then based on your motion, like you can kind of manipulate, and this is something that's interesting with the Karen Reed case, but it doesn't just happen a little bump. Okay. Like Nick said. But it has to be something significant that's going to, if I'm sitting in a car with my phone and I just pick it up and move it from like my console to like, I don't know, moving it up. So I'm watching my GPS. She said, no, that should not do anything, but it moved. And, so, she said, okay, let's talk about the State's Exhibit 227, page 8, outline steps and distance. Do you agree with those? Yes, I saw the same information. So I agree with where he's getting that information from. Yep, I saw that. Okay. Can a phone move and not be walking? Yes, she says. How? Well, it could be in a car driving. iPhone 6S. If you power it off, can it count steps? No, it can't. All right, 4:35 a.m. Any activity on that phone? Well, there's no data that's logged after 4:33 a.m. Okay, so the timing of Cecil's, like line 458 per Cecil's report, the knowledge seat. Do you see that there? Do you see anything that says audio output route? Do you see that somewhere? Yes. It's addressed in his report, and it says that the research is incomplete. Ready? Here's your mom. Well, is that research incomplete? She's like, no, as of 2024, the research is completed. But what does the research tell us now? This guy put down in his report that this knowledge seed database that came back and said that there was the iPhone, it could have been this, how do you say it? He said 1 of 8 things could have been responsible for this this line of data. And so here we go. She says, well, I completely disagree with what he's saying because the research is completed. And what it tells us today and now is that at 5:45 and 24 seconds, the audio output jack in Liberty's phone with a start time of 5:44 and 24 seconds. Yep, the knowledge seed database right there. That the headphone jack was utilized and hardwired headphones were plugged into her cell phone. I said, holy fucking shit. She wasn't done. Exhibit TTT. What does that show you in this in the Knowledge C database? It says that that's creating the event time. So at 5:45 and 24 seconds, there was an audio output input start time from this Knowledge C database, and it was the wired headphones were put in at 5:45. Okay. And the reason this was significant, she said, and it's worth noting, is that just before that happened, like within milliseconds, just before that happened, ready? The phone started ringing. And do you guys remember back in the day what you could do with your headphones, and if you plug it in, what ends up happening? Anything that's playing out, even your ringer, is going to then surface and in through your jacks. So if you plug in something to your phone, it can silence it in a way. So at 5:45 and 24 seconds, Liberty's phone, and it says, you could see it, it's like an Excel spreadsheet, and it's just like how the extractions are. It says audio output jack hardwired headphones. And she wanted to know what was significant is that right before that happened, the phone started, an incoming call. An incoming call is how she said it. And there was an incoming call right before that was inserted. So it's like, and then you, okay. Then she said, well, what else did you find? Well, so it's called an event start. And that's because the event ended at 10:32 p.m., which is when in this line it says the logging to is headphone was pulled out. So your jack, just like how it went in at 5:45 and 24 seconds, at 10:32, the Liberty's inserted wired headphones, the jack, it was taken out. So it ended. It's an end time because that means the headphone jack, they were in there the whole time. So the headphones were plugged in all the way, because then it ends it when it says that it pulls it out, and it treats it as an end. That's when it was pulled out. So that's how it's created, though. That's how the record's created. It's created as an event start time of when the headphones were put in, and then it's an event end time of when the headphones were taken out. That means it happened twice, you guys. This wouldn't just be like, oops, look at what this is. Oops, this has got wet. Look at this. It's just wet. No. This is somebody put the fuckers in, and then somebody at 10:32 pulled the fuckers out. Okay? I said, motherfucking boom. Motherfucking boom. The plugging in, again, it will... And I made my own note because I said, holy shit, the plugging in will stop the ringing. And that's to keep it from fucking making noise. If people were looking for them and calling, that way you would not be able to hear the phone, right? So, also, there was also a discrepancy. Ready for this? Cecil said that the phone traveled 20 feet in elevation. She has 4 flights of stairs in, at 2:33. 4 flights is equivalent to 4 flights. And I'm going to tell you, after being out there, I'm going to tell you, I'm so close to having this all, because I needed to wait to this because there's more. Guess what else came out? Liberty's phone that day at 10:50 a.m., her phone went into low power save mode at 10:50 a.m. And I think this is so interesting, because my question is I was told that Liberty always had her phone, like it was always plugged in and charged. It was always charged. So you're telling me that her phone was in low power save mode at 10:50 a.m. Okay. Remember how right before she got dropped off, because she had taken those selfies in the car allegedly, but that the phone was plugged in? Remember, it registered it being plugged in. So now there's more. Cross. FBI training. Well, you just, when did you do anything? He's just trying to fuck with her with like, okay, you just did this training in 2023, right? She's like, why did the training, I mean, certain things at certain times, but I've always been doing training. I mean, what do you mean? But that's what he's just trying to fuck with. When you've only testified, what, 2007, 2009, and those are for computer things, right? She's like, actually, both in 2011, 2007, 9, maybe it was just for the computer, but you're still doing extraction, and you're still then examining the extraction. But July 2024, that testimony was about an iPhone. There was video on the phone, and it was about the database. She's like, that had it all. So my knowledge C databases, I definitely testified July 2024 about. But guess what? Who the fuck cares if you didn't testify to it? If I found it and I can prove where I found it and how I found it, and here it is. It's fucking here. It's right here. Okay. Well, Brian Bunner, his extraction, 2017, AT&T ping, where the body's found. Did you know that? Were you aware of where that was located? If the phone was off, what, you know? And she's just like, I'm aware that he did the extraction. Obviously, I'm aware that the girls, like, where the phone was, but not like, I mean, it was under the shoe, and then he's like, but it was under her body as well. Nick says, well, how far did you go back? And she's like, well, for starters, at 10:50, I know that her phone was in low power mode because it was low battery. So it changed it to low power mode to try to save battery. Okay, well, you looked at the video, right? That wasn't manipulated, was it? And she's like, no, I don't see that it was manipulated. The video is not manipulated. So she's saying that, no, I can't tell anything about the video being manipulated. Okay. GPS. Did you know that it changes 4 seconds into that, like a picture that changes within 4 seconds of where they were? And she said she didn't review that close enough to, like, that's not what she was there to do. And then, well, the data steps, we got to talk about the steps, right? So are you aware that the health data says at 2:32, there's no more steps, right? It didn't log any movement, right? And how is it measuring the traveling? You said bouncing up and down, right? And then he's like, well, is there any information that from 2:32 to 4:33 that the phone was turned off? And she's like, no, there's no information on that. But that doesn't mean the reason there is no information on that, guys, is because that fucking data was gone. It's not because it didn't exist. It's not because it couldn't have possibly been like, I can't prove that the phone was turned off because that portion of the extraction is missing because y'all didn't do it fucking right. So, out of service. Wouldn't it make more sense that, you know, you have a phone and it could be in the same spot, and because you have bad service in that area, that it could just be going in and out of service? Then it would be going in and out of service, like, throughout the whole fucking time, Nick. All right? If your phone's going in and out of service, then it would go in and out of service from 5:45 to 4:33. It wouldn't go no service, no service, no service, no service. Oh my God, now at 4:33 I have service. Okay? So did you look at the topography? No, I didn't study that. How about the service? How about what the area is like? How about do you know what kind of AT&T, what kind of service it provides in Carroll County? No. And then he's like, so you agree though with everything between 2:32 and 5:45? She's like, no, I don't agree with everything. That's not what I testified to. But he's like, okay, but between 2:32 and 5:45, there's no health data, right? How about FaceTime? And she's like, no, I actually don't agree with that. And I want to know what the fuck they're talking about with this FaceTiming shit, because it was really weird. I don't agree with the voicemails. 4:33, a bunch of activity, so it comes back into service, is what he's saying. She's like, well, a signal blocker. You could stop cell phone call with signal blockers, metal form. And he's like, you have an unrealistic plausibility here. And she's like, and I'm thinking to myself, unrealistic? What the fuck? What are you talking about? I don't have unrealistic shit. That's not what I have here. It could be a lot of, she's like, her answer was, it could be a lot of explanations. With the number one thing being that phone could have been shut off and turned back on multiple times. We don't know because we're missing that data. And then she gets redirected. So Stacy, OJ says, knowledge C. You teach it, right? Yeah. For forensic classes. Yep. February 13th and February 14th. What would you do differently? Well, I would have done a full file analysis on the phone. I would have extracted a full file. Okay. They never did that, right? No, they never did. Okay. Cell tower service, topography. What can the FBI do? What does the FBI do in situations like that? She's like, well, have you ever heard of a test drive? That's what she says. A test drive. That's what you can do. You can do a test drive. It's to test the service. You can test where service exists. Nick was pissed. You guys, they didn't use FBI Cast. ISP, February 2017. And they objected because it was her speculating. And it was like, no, I'm telling you what was available then. In 2017, was it available to do a test drive? Yes. Did they do one? Not that I saw. Did we give you a cast report? No. So the drive study, okay, it sees it talks about where the service would be then. So the FBI, this was awesome. She's like, well, I can tell you this. I did not work for the FBI in 2019, nor in 2017, but in 2019, the FBI, they had an internal leak, and there was a document that leaked in 2019, and it'll tell you everything you want to know about CAST. So if at 4:33 a.m., or I'm sorry, then it was asked, okay, so in 2017, theoretically, it would have been available CAST to do all this, right? And they didn't. Yeah, theoretically, why wouldn't? Yeah. So if Abby's body was not on top of the cell phone, like they were doing like and if ors type of things, if the phone is carried, would it log movement? Then the jury just came with some very interesting questions. Why didn't you make your own report? Limited time with this. She was just hired recently, by the way, and it was limited time with this, but I wasn't asked to write a report. Again, the jury is being hung up on these reports. And I think it's interesting because we're showing you the documentation on the screen in exhibit from the phone and where it was located. And why didn't the state find this? Why didn't the state tell us that Abby's phone or Libby's phone jack was manually inserted and then pulled out. It's there. So the next question is how about syncing to the iPad to the phone? If you were to plug in the iPad with, the phone jack and then unplug it, what would happen? And she says, well, there was no sign of syncing of anything. And the iPad would have its own, like when you're going to extract that data from that personal phone or device, it's going to have its own extraction. And there was no sign of anything syncing. And basically they were trying to say, okay, that if an iPad was linked to this phone in some capacity, what about that? And it's like, no, not at all. But the big word there that I loved about it is that there was no sign of it would say syncing I'm syncing to this, I'm syncing to that. Okay, now she said the iPad, by the way, has its separate knowledge C. Now, water effect. Could the water affect the movement port of, like, could the water affect calculating movement? Number one. I don't know. This is what she says. I have no knowledge that it would. Because then the question is, okay, would water damage affect that input-output device, like where the headphone jack is? And she says, I have no knowledge that it would. That it would affect it. Okay. Well, do you know if the phone was on silent or vibrate? No, I don't have any knowledge of that. Could you try to scramble the Google and mess with and toggle stuff? There was no evidence of that. Could you get data off of like movement from other apps? And she says, Apple Health data. There's other apps that can perform like WhatsApp can track your movement like that. And it was like, well, does Libby's phone, did it have that? I don't know if Libby's phone had WhatsApp like that. Like, again, it's just not what she was doing. She found the information that the state hid. That's what you should be taking away from this. The state tried to hide that at 5:45 or at 5:43 and at 10:32 that Libby's phone was manually inserted a wire jack of headphones and then manually pulled out. Because how else do you get that to happen? And that's what she was saying. You have to. So she demonstrated that in the courtroom. She says, here's your phone, here's your headphones. In order to get that to show up in the knowledge C, this would have to happen. And then she let it dangle and say, now, how would that be able to be pulled out? Well, she's holding it there, and you're going to have to pull that out. So you're putting it in and you're pulling it out. And then they asked, well, would the phone move? Could the phone not move and be on, and you put it in and pull it out? Would it register any steps? And it's like, no, it wouldn't. Like, what? So I thought that those questions were kind of silly. I think that we all know that we can be sitting in our chair right now and I just pick up my phone. Do you think that my phone just recorded a step right there? Absolutely not. Okay. So Then, are you guys ready for this? You can't make this shit up. So before this woman testified, so then that was it, because there was a cross, then redirect, then it was. So then the state had asked for Cecil and Bunner to be in the courtroom when that person, Stacy, testified. So then Stacy stayed in the courtroom for these two recalls, which was Cecil and then Brian Bunner. And we had our 15-minute break in between Stacy testifying, and then that was after her testimony. That was our afternoon break. So from 3:45 to 4:05, that was this break. Then they recall Cecil, and then Stacey Eldridge was allowed to stay in the room to observe because they're both considered rebuttal witnesses. So the jury was brought back in. He sits down. AJ shows defense exhibit timeline. The 4:52, the audio input start. He says he doesn't know. He doesn't know. And then she's like, well, are you able to discuss the cell phone and how it connects to a tower? Nope, that's outside of I don't have any training in that. You were present for Stacy's testimony, right? About the headphone jack? Yes. Do you agree, or could you find, and he says, you guys, I can't believe I'm about to say this. He says, well, during the break, I went and Googled, I did Google searches during the break. Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. Bev overruled this. This is 100% hearsay. He just went out during the break and used his phone. We weren't even supposed to have phones in there. I don't even know how he did this. We're supposed to leave our phones in the basket. He has a phone. He's a witness. How did he have a phone? So during the break, he goes, because he heard hers, he goes out there and he Googles water damage and headphone jack. And so she's like, okay, water damage or dirt in socket. And she says, okay, so, and this, because this gets overruled. So she's like, okay, what Google site did you use? And he says, I used a bunch of them out there. You used a bunch of Google sites. What were you Googling? I don't know, just like it was just a bunch of them. He couldn't name what he Googled. And then he says, it was like, the troubleshooting headphones, iPhone headphones. Like Wawazoo. And she's like, so you researched, you didn't know what it was, and you just. So first of all, let me get this straight. You've had the phone for 7.5 years. Okay. You have no idea what this is. Wasn't important, you guys. You guys don't even look into it. And then now here in a trial, you went out and you did a Google search. Aren't you a digital forensic expert? And you just did a Google search during a trial? Well, is that how you do all your work? Do you just go and Google stuff? Is that how you get all your answers? And he said, no. She's like, did you Google anything for any of your reports? No. Okay. Wouldn't you say that you use peer review? Yes. Okay. So are you aware that there's things on the internet that aren't accurate? That's true. Are you aware that there's things on the internet that are absolutely false? That's true. Are you aware that you weren't able to, using the World Wide Web here during the break time, you had no way of you don't even know the site that you use. You had no way to verify the information, right? No. So in the 7.5 years that you guys had that phone, Did anyone write up a report or do anything as far as writing up a report that pertained to looking into seeing if the phone had water damage? No one looked to see if it had water damage. There's no report about it having water damage. Were you unable to not do any reports because of water damage or dirt? No. So law enforcement could have tested, though, to see if there was water damage, right? Yeah. Could you still test right now? Uh-huh. And all these years, you guys have never tested for water damage. No. When you found the phone that day, was there dirt on it? I have no idea. Answer, I have no idea. So in the 7.5 years to return info to this jury, it comes down to you doing a Google search at the break. No more further questions. The jury had no questions for him. Wouldn't you say to the jury, I have some questions. Did somebody tell you to go out there and Google? Did you ask somebody if you could or should Google? You Googled it and it came back, and his answer on the stand was, well, I Googled it and it came up that, the phone jack could be affected by water or dirt damage. Excuse me? This is in a fucking trial for murder. Witness number 5, Brian Bunner, recall him. You were here for the previous testimony, right? And you previously testified on February, or you previously testified to being with the phone February 15th, 2017. That's when you testified to doing a manual extraction or whatever they did. He testified under oath that he worked with the phone on February 15th, 2017. This woman in here, this is the stuff that people don't want to pay attention to. He testified that on February 15th, he did the extraction. And Homegirl just went up in there today and said that, very interesting, that all of the voicemails came through on the 17th. So if you would have powered up the phone on February 15th, 2017, wouldn't all the downloads from the voicemails go through on that day? And you said you testified that you started working on the phone February 15th, 2017. And did you work on it continuously? Mm-hmm. We did extractions and we, examined it. Mm-hmm. Okay. How about this audio input? Do you know what that is? He said, I don't know what it is. Ever seen it before? I don't know what it is. How about when we had that 15-minute break, did you go out there and do some Google searches on the break? He said no. The jury had no questions. I mean, so that's where my struggle today lied with, wouldn't you have some questions for these two gentlemen to say, how did this woman find this? Do you guys not believe that it's there? You guys see this here. But then they have to say that they believe that it's there, because then after the fact they said, oh, we found something, but we don't know what it is. And so, but she found what it is, because they testified in reports that they provided to say that there wasn't, we're unable to figure this out because the research is incomplete because we're not able to do it yet. And she's just like, that's not true at all. Like, this exists and you could have done X, Y, and Z. And wouldn't you ask these questions? Or do you just think that, or is the jury just chopping these guys up as like, you guys suck? Because I was confused there. So I would love to know your guys' opinion on if you think the jury should have asked questions of these two fucking cocksuckers. Because who the hell goes and Googles something and then has the balls to talk about it on damn, wait, you just went and Googled something? Like, you guys, do you guys understand? Like, I cannot believe that mainstream media is not making a bigger deal about this. an expert witness for the Indiana State Police during the break went out of the room, the courtroom, and got his phone out and Googled iPhone, phone jack, whatever the hell he Googled, and then came back in the courtroom and testified under oath to what the Google, when he says he Googles, he doesn't even know the sites he was on. And he is just saying what these sites, like, well, I went out there and Googled it and it said that your phone can be affected by dirt and or water for your phone jack with your, you guys remember back in the day, first of all, did you Google 2017 phone with iPhone? Did you Google the 6S? You guys remember how they were separate and like you had to plug it up here, the jack, you know how it was separate. But now like you can just, you know, there's no aux cord, I guess you could say, like to aux in. I'm over here just disgusted. I'm like, this is wild. And that was the last witness for today. I struggle with why the voicemails came in on February 17th into that phone. I think that that's very, really interesting. Almost so interesting. It's like, it's wow. He Googled the answer. He thought he could Google the answer. And then she just ate his ass. So I just thought the jury would have questions about it. I would have had questions about it. Have you ever, so how many times have you testified? Have you ever Googled in the middle of a trial before? I found it on the internet. Like, guys, that's what he said. And then she's like, what did you Google? Like, hey, Google, can a knowledge seed database be affected by, I mean, what do you, but the jury didn't have any questions, so I'm just like, I don't know how to take that, you know? Maybe the jury is just done with them. I don't have any questions because this is just, I can't believe this, you know? Or maybe the jury's like, hey, I would have went and Googled it too. Well, yeah, but we're lay people, you know? I don't know. So, all right, guys, I wanted to get this right around 2 hours. Thank you so much. I don't have words. I think that's a huge bang. I personally believe that if we were still able to see that data, we would know when that phone was turned on, turned off, which would be helpful. But I agree with the knowledge C. It's there. Headphones went into that jack at that time and came out of that jack at that time. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that it happened milliseconds after the phone started ringing, because that's a way to shut the phone up. That's a way to make it so that the phone wouldn't be heard, you know? And could it be a way to test that? That would have been like, if we put headphones in it, is this a way for us to test it? Because I think maybe people were more concerned about the Find My iPhone. Even if your phone's off, like it's really, really interesting to me that it almost feels like it was a test to see if we plug it in, will it will cut the ring out, you know? So then the question could be, is who made that phone call that got cut? You know I'm talking about, like what phone call was that? It's just interesting. Did all phones turn off sound when headphones were in? And yeah, the iPhone 6S that she had, 100% did. And that's why the jury asked, well, do you know if the phone was on silent or ring? And it's like, and then they think that the iPhone is connected to the iPad, which is truly, truly interesting, because the testimony about the iPad is that it was locked and that nobody could get into it. So why are you asking if it could be, well, could it be synced to the iPad? And if somebody did something with the iPad, would it, and it's just like, no. Like, that question to me is just, that's like reaching. And you're like reaching for what? Like, I didn't like it. Has anyone tried, could having the headphones in there disable Find My iPhone? I don't know. I just think people should be really appreciative of the defense, because if you want my honest opinion, is they had so many ways that they could have defended Richard Allen, and I think that they did it the most, I think that they could have gone a lot of ways with reasonable doubt. Let's just say that. And I think that they did it in the most respectful way. So there's something to be said about that. Until next time, guys. Baldwin said, human hands. Yep, everything that Baldwin put out in his opening, you can just go ahead and check it off. And that's exactly what he's going to come back and say. He's going to say, I told you guys that it would be X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to show you guys that human hands handled that phone. And do not let the state change their timeline, because they're going to have to change their timeline after we show you that human hands had that phone, and somebody put that jack in and somebody pulled it out, and nobody had answers for it. You know what that means to me? That it's, were the girls alive? Were they dead? Where was the phone? Where is everybody? What's going on here? Should those girls have been found if they really did a search and they're over there in that area? I think so. I walked the area, and if I didn't go across the bridge, because they would have never seen the bridge video yet, so all they would have had is the pictures of them on this side of the bridge, that to go to the left before you would go onto the bridge, that's, if you walk that way, you only got to walk down the hill. Down the hill is a steep way to get down to the flat area where they were found. So it's, I don't know, just interesting. We're going to go this way. Oh, it ends here. I don't know. Then do I think they could have gotten into a car? I don't think there's enough steps for them to walk from going down the hill on the opposite side of the what do you call it? The bridge. The number of steps that they're saying that were only taken, I just don't think there's enough. And I'm curious why they didn't do a test of that. So sad case. But thank you guys so much. Appreciate you guys. On the next time, thumbs it up, share it, use the comment section of the video. Peace.